On your mark. Get set, go.
I got love for my brothers. I got love for my brothers.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? It is your long lost, newly found brother Jamey, James McBride Hammond the Third. Thank you so much for joining today. Welcome to a show you can expect uploads every Tuesday. And the focus, the goal, is to build a space for people to take their power. And what I mean by power, I grew up Pentecostal, so sometimes I gotta speak like a Pentecostal preacher. What I mean by power is the power accessible to each and every human being. It is your right as a human to have access, and not just have access, but harness the same power that God has. We could say it is your inheritance, it is your right, it is your privilege as a human to access a power that allows you to create your life. All of us are qualified to be free. I know that from the bottom of my soul. And that is what this show is based on. I was just talking to somebody the other day about the Constitution of the United States. It was a funny thing because when we say things like we the people, it's important to remember that the foundation's intention is part of the foundation. Sometimes when we talk about foundations, I don't think it's ever made clear what creates a foundation. But part of what creates a foundation is the intention. What is your intention from the beginning? And I think it's important to remember in the West, the intention of this system was not necessarily built. The foundations that were laid to support a we the people that means truly all the people. And I don't mean that in any type of anti-US way. I'm for the US. I believe in us as a people. But in order to move forward at this stage of our development as a nation, I think it's important that we recognize, let's go back. We're not that old of a country. We haven't been around that long. It's important for any business, any endeavor to revisit its foundations. And when we revisit its foundations, sure, it's very messy. It's the messiest work you can do, but it's the most important, especially if our goal is sustainable prosperity, sustainable freedom. Freedom that lasts for our children and our children's children. So when we revisit terms like we the people, it's important to maybe check and see, does we the people truly mean all the people? What do you think? Let's jump right in, shall we? I remember when I had finished pastoring after our church had shut down. And my wife and I renovated an Airstream trailer. And our goal was, as I mentioned in the last few episodes, by the way, now that we're through with the backstory stuff of the first 3 episodes, I hope you loved the first 3 episodes. I hope you enjoyed it. But my least favorite part of any movie is the exposition of any story. It's the part where we're just trying to get everybody caught up. Now we can start to move into Act 1. We can move into the substance, the stuff I really want to talk about. So, that being said, When we moved into the Airstream trailer full time, and we're going from national park to national park, as I told you in the last episode, it was very exposing for me. Because at that point, I had really set an intention to fully let go. Whatever comes in this moment, I'm going to accept it as God's plan, God's will. That's all I'm inviting at this moment. So whatever comes, I'm going to take it with gratitude, and let's just see what happens. What's fascinating during this time was my wife and I being locked in a 22-foot trailer together. Whoo, boy. Talk about pressure on a relationship when you don't know where your next paycheck's coming from, by the way. You don't necessarily know when your job's going to come. You don't necessarily know. There's a lot of uncertainty. And uncertainty can put a lot of pressure on a relationship, especially romantic. And I remember we were having these disagreements on the Airstream, and I couldn't figure out why. I remember being in the middle of a disagreement, and I'm zeroing in on every word she's saying. The literal word. To any of my people in partnerships, do you ever resonate with this? This is an age-old conversation that the masculine and the feminine speak different languages. But how many times have you heard or even said the phrase, "You're not really hearing what I'm saying. You're not really hearing me." And I remember telling Tay, "I'm hearing you. I'm hearing you so literally. Like you just said verbatim, ba 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 ba," and then reiterate everything you just said. But I didn't recognize necessarily this is the difference between what we could qualify as masculine versus feminine. Is masculine. You could also call it right brain versus left brain. Is there's a logical, analytical judgment, and then there's, on the other side, an empathetic judgment. That on one side it's the literal, and on the other side it's the spirit. Where I grew up, you could call this the word and the spirit. It's two different languages, though. And so I'm listening to every literal word she's saying, like, no, I'm hearing you. But I never forget this moment. I was sitting by the campfire after the disagreement. I was cooling down. And I asked myself this question. Or it was more that the question came to me. I don't necessarily know if I can say I asked myself. Do you really know how to listen? I sat for a moment. Because it was very weird because Tay, she's sitting right next to me. And I just asked her. It was a very heavy feeling. Present in my body at that moment. And I turned to her at the campfire. We were in the Rio Grande National Forest. And I said, "When's the last time you felt heard by me?" Oh, my boys, my brothers. That is a sobering moment when you look at your partner and you ask, "When's the last time you felt heard by me?" And they don't know. Yo, that'll stop you in your tracks for a moment. She didn't know. So then at that moment, I really had a decision in front of me, a choice to learn how to listen. So we revisited the conversation. And this time, I'm like, okay, let's get beyond the literal and let's just open my heart, right? Let's let go of all self-consciousness, all awareness of myself, and let's fully focus on her. and let's open my heart. Because here's the thing. When you're sitting in that space of literalness, when you're listening literally to every word, oftentimes you're sitting in a state of judgment. And when you're sitting in a state of judgment, judgment and empathy do not coexist together. Empathy and discernment couple together, but empathy and judgment, they do not go hand in hand. As a matter of fact, there is no discernment without empathy. That's why, I grew up in a religious space where people would use discernment as an excuse to judge somebody. Discernment is a very convenient word when you're a judgmental person. So convenient. Well, I'm just discernment. She's a hoe. Okay, well, we all know you're projecting. You church person, for sure. For sure. Show us what you think about yourself. But regardless, that in order to truly hear someone, we have to open their heart to them. But in order to open my heart to you, I have to access a sense of safety. But in order to access a sense of safety, I have to be able to choose trust. For some of us, oh my God, that might be the hardest endeavor we can go on as a human, but it is the most courageous. Sometimes we think that staying tough is the way to get through life. Stay tough. Especially as an athlete, it's always tough. Stay tough. Stay hard. And the tougher you get, the smaller your life becomes. The tougher you get, the more you seem to cut people out of your life. And the tougher you get. Why is it that it seems to me some of the toughest people, the toughest, are the most alone? And that's why toxic masculinity, this isn't original with me. Alan Watts had made this point that essentially toxic masculinity taken to the furthest extent, the most logical excuse, the most logical reasoning at the end of toxic masculinity of the stay tough thing. Stay tough. The most logical, reasonable end to that is suicide. Because eventually you toughened yourself into complete isolation. And technically, the greatest power, if you're going to stay tough, the toughest thing you could do is take your own life. No, that's not tough. I'm going to stick it out, and I'm going to stick it out alone with all these fake people, all these mistrustful. I empathize. I empathize with that because I know too many men. 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 Dying alone in houses that there used to be families that flourished. There used to be brotherhoods that flourished. But now we stand high on that rock, and is it good, brother? Is it truly fulfilling? Because deep in your soul, I would ask you the question, is it tougher? Does it take more courage to stay tough, or does it take more courage to stay tender? To keep opening your heart up to people? Even though you've been betrayed, even though you've been hurt, even though you've been... It's a defensive posture. We isolate ourselves to protect ourselves. And my brother, I understand why. Of course. You're not unreasonable for doing that. It's not unreasonable at all that you would see the world and say, well, the smartest move I could make is probably just to build walls as high as the sky, never let anyone in again, and I'm going to make sure I don't get hit, I don't get hurt in the same way that I have. But my brother, the only way to connection, to love, to richness, to life is to have the courage to open up. It's worth the risk. It's worth the risk. Because what's more dangerous? Losing your soul in isolation or losing your body in a constant opening and reopening? I make all this point to say, I can't hear you as long as I am self-conscious, but I am only self-conscious as long as I judge myself. That's why last week we talked so much about grace, because I cannot extend grace to you that I have not extended to myself, which is why the most judgmental people we know, just a reminder that the critics in your life are just mirrors of themselves. There's a fascinating verse. It's one of the most quoted verses in the entire Bible, yet the whole portion isn't fully quoted. And what this verse is from the book of Deuteronomy. And it says, listen, listen, O Israel, for the Lord your God is one. Love your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus was asked, what is the greatest commandment? And Jesus quoted this as the greatest commandment in the Torah. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength, and you shall love your neighbor. Love your neighbor as yourself. But we forget what is right before. What is right before this great commandment? Listen, listen, O Israel, the Lord your God is one. Listen, listen. The most important thing. You know, I hate the word spiritual, but when it comes to the most important, I don't even want to call it a skill. I want to call it a habit. I want to call it a posture. I want to call it a lifestyle. The most important thing you can do is be a good listener. And I really mean period. I mean, for me, I will die on that hill that the greatest thing you could be in a room is the greatest listener. Because if I don't know how to listen, how do I know how to speak? If I don't know how to listen, how do I know how to act? If I don't know how to crawl, how can I walk? There are foundations to these things. There are foundations. There are movements through stages of life. There's an evolution. So many of us, we learn how to speak before we learn how to listen. My dad used to say that to me. That was one of his things. He would always be like, Jamey, you don't really know how to listen. So it was a fascinating thing. I guess over the past 4 years now, dedicating myself to developing a posture, a life posture of listening. I did want to say this on this show. We will be bringing on guests. As I've told you from the beginning, I don't necessarily want this to be all about my voice. I want this to be a space that lifts up other voices as well. But what's most important, especially in brotherhood, in the context of this relationship dynamic, in the context of this show, the community that we're building, to know how to listen. I cannot listen to you as long as I judge you, and I cannot judge you if I truly empathize with you, because in order to empathize with you, I must identify with you. I have to see myself in you. And then when you're able to do that, every single person you come across is like listening to God speak from his throne. Every voice is dignified. And then when you keep your ears open, your heart open, now we're allowed to be students of everything. Beware of the teacher who's not a student. Beware of the teacher. Let's not even call them teachers. A teacher isn't a teacher unless the teacher is a student. It's funny, in school, the idea of how we grade intelligence, how we grade you, that your performance is more based on memory and retention than it is about ability to invest in the present. Where there's a different kind of, some might call it common sense, some might call it revelation, but there are two different kinds of knowing. You can know what you've accumulated, but there's also another form of knowing where I can know what is unknown. I can know whatever I choose to know. To some, that might sound a little bit spooky. Like, wait, what? That didn't make any sense. But just try that out. Start to release the idea that knowledge is what you've accumulated. That knowledge is all based on the ability to memorize, and that knowledge is more based on your ability to memorize than it is based in your ability to engage with present experience. And that's the first thing that's most important in listening, is you cannot listen if you're not present, if you're not right here, right now. But the thing is, most of us, as the good old pastor sage Yoda said, that, oh boy, you spend all your life looking at the horizon, but never here in this moment. You're always looking, you're anticipating, you're always somewhere else. Just be here. Be here with me. Be here in this moment. Be here with your partner. And from that place of presentness, then we're able to move into a space, though. If you're speaking to me, this is also, by the way, I hesitate to say this, my brothers. Most men, and this is not just reserved to one culture. This is all of us. This is everybody. We don't know how to listen. We don't know how to listen, man. And it's no wonder that so many of us not only feel disconnected from our masculinity, but feel disconnected from purpose in life, feel disconnected from God. We feel disconnected from everything. But the baseline of connection is the ability to hear. The baseline. If we can't hear, we can't connect. That goes with God, that goes with women, that goes across the board. So the most important skill you can cultivate is the ability to open your heart and hear somebody. Hear yourself. The ability to hear ourselves. You ever had somebody turn it around on you and say, do you even hear yourself? A lot of us don't. That's a real thing. A lot of us don't actually hear ourselves. And a lot of where that can be cultivated is in a space of silence. Silence is one of the most reconciling places for your relationship to yourself. Because now, let's hear your thoughts. Now, let's observe myself. What happens when I'm just alone? When I'm just quiet? What am I thinking about? What do I want? But in such a fast-paced culture, so fast, sometimes it's rare we even get a chance to slow down and listen. So number one, I have to be present enough to hear you. And then number two, I have to release self-consciousness. I can't listen to you and be aware of myself at the same time. I have to focus on you. Focus. And it is funny because it's always going to come back full circle. It's a toxic pattern, man. It's a toxic pattern. Because you've heard that very stereotypical generalization of a communication pattern that happens in relationships. Especially, this was something that was displayed a lot in Hollywood in like the 90s, 2000s, was you have a couple who's been together for a long time and you have the naggy feminine, right? Naggy wife. She's nagging me. She's always talking to me. She's always telling me to do stuff. Always on me. Always. And what do you have? You have the non-listening husband. Sorry, what? No, yeah, absolutely. No, you pick the red one. Yeah. I didn't say the red one, John. I didn't ask you about the red and the green one, John. I asked you about, well, what do you do? What's the most natural response when you are used to feeling unheard? If you're not going to hear me, you're going to see me. Which is, it's not true. That's not true at all because I can't see you if I can't hear you. But our natural response is, okay, well then I'll make myself seen. It's interesting, right? Because when we talk about hearing God, it can become very frustrating for a lot of people. For me as a pastor, this was one of the most common frustrations people dealt with on a spiritual path. Again, I hate the word. On a life path. Just so you know, in this context, I will always just use life instead of spiritual because they are not separate. The most common frustration I would experience from congregants, from people who had devoted themselves to that path was, I don't feel like I can hear God. Like, what does God's voice sound like? And this is why I went over in our first episode, I believe it was week 1 or week 2, that where a lot of religious spaces will take this verse that says God spoke in a small, still voice. And so they'll even teach children like that in a lot of religious circles, that, well, God, he speaks in a really small, quiet voice. But it's a mistranslation because in Hebrew, it doesn't say small, quiet. It says God spoke from stillness. God spoke from quietness. So before we can hear noise, you have to hear silence. If you're going to devote yourself to becoming a good listener, we have to know how to hear silence. Because once you can hear silence, you're able to hear it anywhere. Because I live in Los Angeles, man. I learned how to hear silence when we lived in national forests. It's easy. But then you find out very quickly that silence is never found in the external. It's only found in the internal. That, sure, you can escape to the mountains. You can escape wherever you want to go, but the noise will follow you. I am the noise. So many of us, we want to escape the noise by going somewhere where it's silent externally, but the noise internally will drown the silence externally, guaranteed. The only way to truly find stillness is going inward. And once I can hear it here, doesn't matter where I am. You could be in chaos. And I've seen people in my crisis work. I've seen people who have found a way to access that. Not disassociate, but they'll almost go deeper in the moment. And they'll find a silence there. When everything looks like it's burning, things just look like absolute mayhem. And yet they exhibit what you might call a peace that passes all understanding. Yeah, man. It'll give you chills to see somebody embody that. But the first thing we can do to cultivate the posture of learning is by taking those times in silence. Again, I just heard Denzel talk about this. What a legend, man. I still haven't seen Gladiator yet, but I'm going to see it this week. I saw Wicked, though. Man, Ariana, I knew she was her. I knew she was her, but I didn't know she was her. I didn't know that she could act like that. That was incredible, dude. Incredible. I'm such a fan now. Denzel was just saying this in his last interview with Mezcal, with Paul Mezcal, that one of the most important things he would recommend our generation to do is take 5 minutes of silence just right when you wake up. And it's not an easy thing to do. And then at the very end of the interview, he says, what would you do with 5 minutes of silence? I'd say hear ourselves. Finally hear ourselves, maybe. And once I can hear myself, then I can hear you. And I wonder how much, especially when it comes to peacemaking between nations, between families, in all of our relational dynamics, so much of peacemaking is simply the ability to hear you. There is no peace if there's not hearing. If there's not mutual listening, no. Let's not even talk about peace. No way. Not even close. It will not happen. I guarantee you it will not happen. The only way that a way for peace can be made is if there is a mutual hearing. But I can't come to a mutual hearing until there is an individual hearing of myself to myself. Does Jamey hear Jamey? And once Jamey can hear Jamey, okay, now let me hear you. I know there are bills to pay. I know there's so much you got going on. I know you're just trying to survive, man. I know. I hear you. I know. But listening is the most productive. The ability to listen is the most productive investment you can make. It is free. It is free. I'm not doing a course on this. This isn't being, you don't have to pay. This will pay off for you in a way that I promise you nothing else will. I promise. I promise you as your brother. Because there's nothing to see until you hear. If what I'm seeing is disconnected from an ability to hear empathetically from my heart, then I'm not seeing clear. The eyes of my heart are blind as long as the ears of my heart are deaf. I have to admit too, a large part of this was pastoring after George was killed. I'd say at that point my church, it just kept shrinking, man. It kept shrinking. Because I was also embodying grief, right? As I told you last week. And it's COVID. People don't want to come to church. There's a lot of reasons, but I'm going wild in the pulpit, man. I'm going wild. My time in between the pulpit each weekend, I made it my endeavor to listen as much as I could to the Black Americans in my church. Because the thing is, if I can hear you, I can feel you. As a matter of fact, I don't hear you if I don't feel you with my heart. That's what I mean about empathetic listening. In crisis terms, active listening. Active listening is a full focus engagement on not just what I'm literally hearing you say, but what am I feeling you say? Because sure, if I listen to what you literally say, but I don't open my heart to feel what you empathetically say, then I might miss you entirely. Well, so what you're saying is, no. Like, this is another human being. I'm going to open myself. And a large part of this episode, part of the reason why I'm making this our first episode after all the backstory, after all the context, there is no healthy brotherhood without mutual listening. To me, it is the most important. There is not a more important posture. Especially in a world where there are so many talkers. Everyone's talking, all this noise. But how many good listeners? I think that should be the first prerequisite for any leader of any nation is, can you hear? Can you hear? Can you hear the people singing the song of angry men? Do 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 do. Can you hear? You hear the people sing. We need representatives who have the ability to not just hear what someone is literally saying, but what to feel, to open your heart, to let go of your own self-consciousness. Forget what you look like. Forget what you sound like. Just hear. Listen, listen, O Israel, for the Lord your God is one. And something about taking a posture of listening then propels you into, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, all your strength. and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. So the natural symptom of a listening life is a love-filled life. What happens after listen? Listen, love God, love life, love your neighbor as yourself. The more you listen, the more it empowers you to love, which is interesting because a lot of the times I think we don't want to listen because we think it might make us hate people more. I don't want to listen to this dude. He's not worth listening to. No, everyone is worth listening to. Everyone is worth listening to. If you are made in the image of God, if you are a human being, you are absolutely worth listening to. Brothers, open your hearts, open your ears, and listen. Come back to the moment. Be present with me here. What do you hear right now? Man, bro, I just want an Uncrustable, bro. I just want a glass of milk, bro. I'm kidding. So irreverent. Listen. Again, I'm going to attach practices to the Substack article corresponding to this episode. With every episode I post, I also post an article with it on Substack because, as I've told you, most of how I'm engaging is through Substack. So if you want to message me about mentorship, crisis support, even just to say what's up, even just to talk to me, I do it through Substack because that's just where I engage most. That's where I spend a lot of my time. There's so many great writers, so many great voices, just brilliant voices on that platform. And so I see it as a great opportunity to converse, to grow together. So I'll be attaching those practices on how to cultivate a listening life in that article. But I felt this was the most important place for us to start. Because in a world where we see power as being measured by who has the microphone, in this community, I'd like to switch that and say the one with the greatest power is the one listening more than anyone else. It's the greatest listener. One of my main goals in life is to continuously grow in my ability to hear. When I hear you on the other side of the camera, I hear greatness. You say, nah, you don't hear me, Jamey. I'd say, nah, I don't think you hear yourself, baby. I don't think you hear yourself. I think I hear greatness on the other side of the camera. I think I hear a story being lived that is greater than anything that has ever been told before. I hear on the other side of the camera somebody who doesn't just live in this endless vacuum of potential, but somebody who uses it, somebody who goes out today and you're not just going to exist, you're going to make intentional decisions. Oh yeah, my guy. You're going to go out and you're going to just flourish. You're going to hear a peace on the inside of you that sounds like stillness. And you're going to be still. You're going to be so joyfully still. And that stillness will move through you. You'll dance, you'll sing, you'll laugh. Yeah. All of that comes from silence. And your relationships are getting deeper. I'm seeing you over there. I'm seeing you. Okay. Look at you growing your relationships. No, that's right. And you're growing in your ability to listen. That's what I hear and see on the other side of the camera. And I see it in the whole other Jamey community. I don't know if we should call this community the Your Brother Jamey community. Let's just say your brother. Your brother. It's a familial community. It sounds a bit cultish to say familial, but I do think family is the thing. Family is the foundation. And I know so many of us are looking for it right now. And if you're looking for it, this can be it. This can be it. Anyway, I'm your brother. I think this was episode... Yo, guys, we're on episode 4. We're going to be having guests coming on in the next few weeks. It's probably going to be me for the next 2 or 3 through the holidays. But come January, baby, oh my goodness. Oh, it's listening time. Jamie's not going to have to monologue for the whole hour. Nope. Some of you guys are like, thank you. Jamie, we don't want you to monologue anymore. That's fine. But what I can tell you is, since I've started this show, I've gained about 10 pounds. Why? Because it's big boy season, dog. It's big boy season. Yeah. Working on some things right now that are gonna demand me to put on some weight. So what are we doing? Yeah, we're putting on weight. Feels good, man. Woke up this morning, had some pancakes. Yeah. And then what did I have next? I had some what's the next thing? I had some oats. Then I had some beef and turkey. And then I had some turkey and rice. And then I had some, woo! Can you tell I've only had 3 shots of espresso? Because I'm about to have another 3 right now. What time is it? It is early enough. I hope you're fantastic. I believe in you so much. And I'm grateful to be your brother. I truly love you. And thank you for listening. All my love to you. I'm your brother.